Bill.
Okay. I just clicked got it, so I should be ready, right?
Yep.
Good evening, folks. It's my pleasure to introduce Cecilia Hobbs to you, a key member. Cecilia is a key member of the Delaware Poor People's Campaign Steering Committee. Cecilia had been involved in the nursing profession for many years, about 35 years, in various locations in New Jersey and Atlanta and in Wilmington. In 2023, she decided to retire and kind of quickly joined the Delaware Poor People's Campaign and became a very active member of our steering committee. Cecilia is dedicated to organizing a moral response to the pain that poor and low wealth people experience. So it's my pleasure to say good evening to Cecilia, and please meet her. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is such an honor to be among all of you, and I thank you for inviting me this evening for your meetings, and your regular meetings that you have. So what I found out was the Poor People's Campaign, and we're in 31 plus states, so it's a national thing, but we represent Delaware because that's where Bill and I are as part of the coordinating committee for Poor People's Campaign for Delaware. So what we try to do, particularly, even though it's a national stage, we try to cater the needs of our message to Delaware, because there's a lot going on in Delaware. We have a big Delaware fact sheet that tell us about the poor and low wage people. So we strive to, look at those numbers and take that information to our legislators. For example, the minimum wage. I think I read somewhere that, and I never knew what the minimum wage was, because I never worked with the minimum wage as a nurse, but to find out that the minimum wage was as low as it was just shocking to me. And now I think they're proposing, right, that the minimum wage go up to 14 something. I think it started this year, and then eventually we'll get to 15 next year. It's like, why not 15 now? Even 15 is not enough. People have to work so many hours, even at $15 an hour. So you can imagine the struggles, right, that they're having with the wages. So we take that to our legislators, information like that. Healthcare. So many people are suffering from healthcare or lack thereof of having healthcare for themselves. And a lot of that will lead to homelessness because they're struggling to pay those bills for rent, for prescriptions, for doctor, taking the kids to the doctor, daycare, it's just so much that could put a person into poverty. So we, whether it's Delaware or nationally, we know that poverty is the fourth leading cause of death. And that's crazy to think about poverty being a fourth leading cause of death, right? But it exists, and that is a huge, huge issue. So I'm so we like to tie into organizations that kind of have the same train of thought that we do. It may be different pieces, like what y'all have going on, but collectively we all want the same thing. We want to address those issues that we're having with low wages, the poor, and the homeless, and poverty, correct? In one form or another, different organizations are working on their part for that. So that's why collaboratively, we like organizations that join along with us, because the more voices out there, the more, it'd be heard. So when we have that march, well, prior to March, I'm sorry, let me back up. On February the 20th, we're going to the State House. We're going to have media there and presenting to our legislators what we're going to talk about on March 2nd down in Dover. So I don't know how much information. I think Lynn put out information about our March 2nd event, correct? Y'all aware of that, right? So prior to March 2nd, we're going to take this information to our state legislators and meet with them to let them know that we're coming March 2nd down in Dover. They may be at a session then, but we already got the names of the ones who's going to be there, and we're going to tell them exactly what we're going to be doing on March 2nd. From March 2nd, we're going to then do it nationally, where all 31 plus states will come together down in DC. And collectively, we do the same thing, but we just bring it to a bigger platform. So because we have 31 states representing us at that time. It is our hope that, a group of you would join us, as many as possible, because we sought to get 1,000 people down. That was our goal. Well, we know how small Delaware is, but I think half of that would be a successful. I would be happy to see 500 of us down there. We're doing a lot of planning for that because it takes a lot. You have to go through getting your permit from the city of Dover. Then you have to go through. I mean, I did so much paperwork. I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted with applications at this point, filling out, but it's needed. We do have a backup plan for, case of inclement weather to be at Wesley. I'm probably not going to say the United Methodist Church, I think it is. But that's on I think it's on the flyer as well. So we, as Poor People Campaign, we're not partisan at all, because we want to support the representatives that support our issues. So I typically say I'm a Democrat, but I'm going to go to those Democratic leaders, but also the Republicans, and give them an opportunity. Who is going to help support our needs, right? Who's going to be there to meet these issues and our concerns that we have about poverty and low wages and low income people, the homelessness. I don't know how many of you feel, but because I get around a lot with different organizations or churches, and I see these homeless people sleeping wherever they're sleeping. And oh my God, that is just the most horrific scene for me to see. It is awful because it doesn't have to be that way. If we're the richest country, why do we have homelessness? We're going to tackle, I don't know if y'all heard, but President Biden released like $3.16 billion to HUD recently, and 10 million of that is going to the state of Delaware. So that money needs to be tracked because we know how money can get lost, how, we see that big number and it's like, well, why are we still seeing homelessness? Why aren't there affordable housing out there for these people, right? So those are the issues that we look to address and to continue to follow that continuum to make sure that that poverty and homelessness is being addressed in Delaware, and that the healthcare, the jobs. I think jobs personally, I think they are abundant. I think we have a lot of jobs out in Delaware. The pay may be poor, but there's jobs out there to be taken. We have immigration issues. I think Delaware deported 10 immigrants, and I'm trying to remember what year that was because I was tracking that information too. Between October 22 and June 2002, over 10 people were deported from Delaware. And I'm sure it's going to increase because they're having a hard time agreeing on a bipartisan deal for the immigrants, right? And what to do with them. They're holding up Ukraine funds and funds for Israel just because of stuff like this. And it doesn't have to be this way. It is awful that people are held hostage, and that we need to fight poverty and not the poor. And that's what the Poor People Campaign main goal is, to make sure that our legislators know it's not about you fighting poverty and withholding those funds. Take care of the poor. We have religious faith leaders on our committee. We have impacted people, which we're looking to even grow that even more because there's so many people out there impacted, so many, but actually trying to find them and get them on our coordinating committee is our toughest struggle, but we're not going to give up because we know there's a lot of them out there that could definitely understand this cause and want to see things get better for them as well. And then there's the advocates such as Bill and myself who have the social conscience to do something about it. So that's the gist of our coordinating committee. And then we have a large base. So the coordinating committee are the people who want to have meetings like we're doing now. Once a week we meet and we discuss all the issues. It's an actionable meeting. Like we'll bring all the actions we've done so far, based on if they were assigned or they were volunteered by some of our members, and then find out what action was taken and how successful was it, or what were the barriers for that. And then our faith leaders, of course, they're important, right? I mean, from the various churches, and we have touched base with so many churches, and I'm so glad because our faith leaders are the ones that will give comfort and inspiration to those that I was just referencing earlier, right? It's such a necessary branch of our organization. And then, we'll get to the social conscious ones that keep fighting and fighting because we won't be silent. We have no intentions of going away until all our demands are met. So we're not an insurrection group, we're a resurrection. It's called the Third Reconstruction, picking back off from MLK and so forth, all those great leaders before us that sought to make things better. And with that, I will open it to questions if there's any, or hi, Roger.
Do you have a platform on early childhood education in that group of things that you are trying to work with the legislature on?
We put, because on that flyer, those are the basic things that we're doing, living wage of healthcare, voting rights. And I forgot to mention that we're voting, and I'll answer your question, Roger. I'm sorry, I'm not pulling away from that. But voting in Delaware, we have, the number is astronomical, the number of low wage people that are not voting. So we'll be tackling that issue as well. So, because with the voter suppression, I don't think that's such a big deal in Delaware, but definitely nationally, equal rights for all workers, labor rights, environmental access to housing, fully funded public education, and abolishing poverty. So I don't know if that fully funded public education addresses your question or not.
It probably does because I think there is a recognition that if we put more money into education in general, but particularly into the younger groups,
absolutely,
because that's where it begins. I mean that the first few years of life are so instrumental in setting up success or failure, and even success or failure just in school, because they get an attitude towards school that it's okay and it's learning and you get something, and that sets up an attitude of can do. You can do it.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Very good point. So yes. Any other questions?
I'm not sure what the actual statistics are in Delaware, but I know that here and across the country, the issue of poverty and homelessness dramatically affects children.
Yes.
When you see the actual statistics of homeless children, you talk about trying to educate young ones, and when they have no home to live in, the hurdles are astronomical. I saw a post, I think it's called Troop 6000. Has anyone heard of Troop 6000? It's in New York City, and it is a troop of Girl Scouts, and they are selling cookies.
Mhm.
but the troop is entirely made up of young girls living in homeless shelters.
Wow.
And they have Girl Scout leaders who
Mhm.
are working with them to give them the Girl Scout experience. And it's hundreds, if not thousands, of young girls who are getting that experience. You can actually go online and buy cookies from them,
Oh, wow.
or make a donation to them.
Yeah.
But for those of us who were Girl Scouts and used to sell cookies at 35 cents a box, it's now $7.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's that.
And the
Um,
boxes are smaller.
well, they are, but we don't need the calories anyway. But I was really struck by the number of young girls in these homeless shelters and how the Girl Scouts of America have kind of come together to try to give these girls what many of us would consider just a normal, basic
Neat. Yeah.
community experience.
Yes.
It really gives you hope. Do you know
Yes, it
that,
does. It
things are
does.
possible?
Wow. That is truly amazing. I haven't heard of that, but I'm inspired by that. Thanks
Just
for
saw it
sharing
this
that.
week. Yeah. Well, it's cookie time now. So yeah.
It sure is. Yes.
Marge?
Okay.
Um, I think that's a wonderful story, but I think it dilutes where our energies should go.
Absolutely.
When you hear the stories, I hear them in the Department of Education and other places where the success stories of kids who were homeless and somehow made a success out of their lives. Isn't that wonderful? And
Yes.
I think, isn't it wonderful that these girls have this group to cohese around and be supportive of them? But the point is, they shouldn't be in homeless shelter.
Exactly.
There's no reason people should be homeless.
That's the point. That's right.
Yep.
And I think there are so many creative ways that we could be providing housing for people. The big push now is on affordable housing, but affordable housing is affordable for the middle class. It is not affordable for
That's
people
right.
who are struggling day to day.
Yes.
And where is the solution for that? I'm not saying I have it. I just say I think we often look at the wrong place to say, oh, aren't we wonderful?
Yeah, it's almost like following the money, right, Marge? So when you think about it, like I was talking about with Biden infusing $10 million just for the state of Delaware. So if that's for HUD, okay, now in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, they should be able to put up many affordable housing with that, right? But then you get the pushback of residents too, right? Because they think, oh my
Oh,
goodness,
yeah.
you're bringing in people on drugs and mental illness, and so it's a whole big block of issues that make things harder than what they need to be. And what they don't realize, think about it. I mean, I'm assuming all of us are homeowners. When we own a home, we take care of our home. We're happy, right? We want our property to look nice. We want our neighbors. So I think it's an educational piece that need to go out into the community too, to dispel that disbelief that just because you're getting someone who is paying lower rent or than you are, your mortgage, well, it doesn't mean that your area is going to be torn down or become crazy. So it's almost like you have to follow the money, because then you have the situation where people get into these affordable homes, and then what happens? Price gouging with the rent, right? I mean, I've heard from homeless people, and that was the reason they became homeless, because they were able to afford the rent when they obtained that place, but then these landlords or whatever, they just went crazy. They just went absolutely crazy and just started raising the rent so high, making it unaffordable for these people. So for me, that's the bigger issue too. Not only trying to get the homeless off the streets, but following that path to make sure that those loopholes are closed. That, it's not, they're not going into a place where the landlords are going crazy, or that, they're having all this pushback in the community, or the neighbors or the residents. So it's a whole big picture that needs to be broken down in different parts and follow through that way.
Roger?
I think we keep going back to keep moving back. I don't know if peeling the levels off, the layers off the onion or not is an appropriate analogy, but we were where I see the Poor People's Campaign headed, or trying to have an impact, keeps going back to who has the basic responsibility to fix these things, to fix these dilemmas. And how can we, the public, and in the Poor People's Campaign's mission, how can the poor and poverty impacted people influence the legislation of this country to be more aggressive, to be more inclusive, to get rid of the injustices that exist throughout the country? So when I think of March the 2nd, and when I wonder why I'm going to go down to Delaware or down to Dover for an hour or so on Saturday, March the 2nd, I wonder why I'm going. And I think what I've thought about anyway is the fact that the Poor People's Campaign is trying to put together a new mass of people, a mass of poverty and of poor and poverty impacted people that say, we have a voice. We are down here standing on the green of Dover and the legislature, and we're going to vote. It all kind of comes down to voting, I think. We're going to vote.
That's right.
And we're going to vote for you, the various legislatures, and we're going to vote for president, and we're going to go through that whole process this year. And we're here to be reckoned with. We have a power. We have found a new power. And a lot of the poor and poverty impacted folks do not vote. And we're trying to get them more involved in the process. We're trying to get them more involved in voting and influencing legislatures. So the focus of March the 2nd is really on the Delaware legislative folks.
Yes.
And all we can do in one little rally is say, we're here. We're here, and we're dedicating ourselves to vote for these things that you need to come up with. You're responsible for correcting that. You're responsible for doing it. And we're going to watch and see how you do and vote accordingly.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. It seems to boil, goes way back to the good old ballot box, but seems like a long way back there. But
yeah, but you're
I
right.
don't know.
I have a
Very
point
good
to
point.
just interject. Sorry, Roger, to cut in front of you.
They know
It's
each
not
other.
the first time.
They know each other.
Can you vote if you don't have an address?
Yes, you can.
You can. Okay. I wasn't sure about that.
Yes, you can.
Okay, good. You should be able to.
That's right.
Okay.
So one of the most fundamental things is to find ways to convince people that their vote would matter.
Yes.
Yep.
Because I think for so many people, it's like, well, you know, I'm invisible, my issues
Mhm.
aren't resonating.
That's right.
What I think doesn't matter. I'm one vote. And so it's gathering the numbers, gathering the people,
Yes.
expressing the fact that the way this system works, votes matter.
Yes, it
And
does.
so there
Yes,
is an
it does.
opportunity to make a real difference. And that would seem to me to be
Mhm.
one of the significant challenges and opportunities
Yes.
to move this forward.
Absolutely. And that's why we are pushing for more impacted people to be in our presence because their voices need to be heard, right? They're getting the media attention. They know that we're addressing these issues to our legislators. That that is why we're working really hard to get as many impacted people together as we can. Not just for March 2nd, but this is an ongoing issue because as we all know, this is not going to happen overnight. Our legislators not going to, you know, jump just because they hear this right away. They're going to have to keep hearing it drummed in their ear over and over and over again.
Right.
And that's what we try to do.
And
Roger, Sandy says you can talk now.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
skipping Roger.
my turn.
Imagine that, huh, Roger?
Yeah. I've heard the interlocking issues of poverty and education and homelessness and whatnot. You got to start somewhere, but this is from a position of pure ignorance. A lot of times I've heard about people in New York say, "Well, I live in a rent-controlled apartment."
Mhm.
And what is rent control? And is that a situation that we have in Delaware at all? And how does that all work? I speak from complete ignorance of that situation. How does rent control work in New York? Because apparently it works, but I don't know.
Somebody want to answer that? Because that's a very good question. I'm not sure how rent control work in New York, but that's
I do believe we have
because
it.
Cecilia, you mentioned that the landlords keep, upping
price
the price
gouging.
according to the what the market will bear.
Right.
And these people get tossed out. And
Yes.
New York found a way around it. I don't know how successful, but I've heard it spoken many times that
Mhm.
they were immune from this latest inflation because they had rent control.
Well, I know that's worth looking into, that's for sure, because I definitely would want to know because that's something that, it's a good point to address it even to our legislator, if this is an example of how you can, prevent this.
Yeah.
So I definitely thank you for mentioning it. I will want to look into that.
Well, I think it would depend on who you ask whether rent control works or not.
Mm-hmm. I
So
was going to
Yeah.
Google. I was going
certainly
to
for the
Google.
landlord, it doesn't work so well.
Right.
For the renter, it probably works. And I know they're dismantling a lot of it in New York um, because they had a lot of rents that were way back in years before that couldn't keep up with what inflation had done.
Yeah.
That's you have to look at say, well, what does the market bear? Can you charge whatever because somebody will pay it? Is that that's an American thing, actually.
Well,
So
unfortunately, yeah, it
yeah,
is.
But there's
so
also a lot of indexes such as consumer price index and rate of inflation, and you could maybe come up with something that's tied to more like what are the realistic cost increases, not
Yeah,
necessarily what the market will bear.
right.
I agree with you. I just heard a report tonight on the news hour about how, rents had gone up astronomically in a
Yes.
lot of places across the country.
Mhm.
And it's just people will pay it. So if you were a landlord and wanted to make money off your properties, would you rent to low income people or would you rent to people who could pay what would pay your bills for you?
Well, you know,
Or
it's
more.
really, it's very interesting to see what has happened in New York City since the pandemic.
Mhm.
Because at the time of the pandemic, many people moved out of the city.
That's right.
They moved elsewhere and the
Mhm.
properties were vacant.
Mhm.
And as the situation started to stabilize, an inordinate number of owners of these properties determined that making them available for annual rents, annual leases, was not nearly as lucrative as turning
Of
them into
course.
Airbnbs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so an inordinate number of properties became Airbnbs in New York
Mhm.
City, so that when people wanted to move into apartments, they simply weren't available.
That's
So the
right.
city is trying to deal with that circumstance and try to prevent that from being the case.
Right.
I did take a look at rent control in New York, and it applies to buildings built before 1947
Yeah, I knew.
and people who have been living there continuously since before 1971.
Mhm.
So it is not a citywide solution to the problem.
Right.
It applies to certain people, but it all came about as a result of the post-war demand for housing
Mhm.
and the dramatic increase in rents that took place. And at that time, certain municipalities stepped in and said, we're not going to allow this. But it's for properties built before 1947 and people who've been living there since 1971. So
So
as
it
a
does address.
solution, it's not terribly attractive, but clearly it would appear that there should be some means of regulating rent increases, although, you know, it's the capitalist system, supply and demand, what the
Yeah.
market will bear. It will take some creative thinking to put something in place. I think it could be done.
Oh,
And
yeah,
it's done on an
definitely.
experimental basis.
Mhm.
But it's, rent control is certainly not the solution to the problem, but it does demonstrate that some degree of control is possible if we can get
That's right.
creative about it.
Absolutely.
It's interesting to see several of us on the Poor People's Campaign Steering Committee are visiting the subsidized rental facilities here in Wilmington. And so a friend of mine and I decided that we would see what we could generate in terms of interest and participation in the March 2nd with the two Luther Towers and Lincoln Towers.
Mhm.
So we've visited those three facilities, and it's an education and a half to just to get in there and talk to the right folks, and we're still working on it, but our objective is, out of those three facilities, just that small group of high rises, that we get the maximum number of people to agree to get on a bus, and we provide the bus, and we take them down to Dover on March the 2nd.
Right.
And it will really be an interesting study as to how we make out. And because it's interesting in talking to the management of these three facilities. I guess it's just two facilities. Luther Towers 1 and 2 are probably under the same management, but Lincoln Towers is different. And I'm beginning to see differences between the management of those two facilities, and we're trying to get some leadership out of the management of the facilities to encourage people to listen to us, to understand what the Poor People's Campaign is about, and come with us, and
That's right.
and then ultimately vote. And so we'll see how that works, but it's a It's an interesting cut of our society in those groups.
Yes, it is indeed.
It's interesting that within those subsidized apartments, HUD, and I think other than HUD, there's another agency, has a contract with the League of Women Voters to hold the internal elections for those subsidized apartments. So when they have an election to elect a board for how their facility, internal facility should be run, the League of Women Voters does that. They go in and run that election for them.
Oh,
And it's very interesting because we often have to go up. It's tricky to do that, but to go up and kind of bang on doors and say, come down and vote, you know,
Yeah,
because
Yeah.
we want as much participation as is possible for them to say, you know, who should be running the facility that they live in. So I think it is easy for us to think about what the bigger picture is. But when you're living in a subsidized apartment, wondering where your next meal is coming from and if you're going to be able to pay the next month's rent, that picture it's like not in your realm.
Right.
It's like, how do I get to tomorrow? And should I just go downstairs on the elevator and vote or not? It kind of, you're right, Bill, when you go in there, it changes. It's an interesting experience and it changes your perspective about, you know, what people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I'm wondering how significant is the fact that most people like us, most people don't have a gut appreciation for what it is to be poor, for what it is to be one flat tire or one medical bill or one prescription away from not being able to pay the rent, from being evicted, from living in your car. I don't think, while many of us may have heard a story, or I don't think we get what it's really like. And I think that we have a belief at some fundamental level that if these people would just get their act together, they wouldn't have these problems. I mean, I still remember some years ago, people having a fit that these homeless people had cell phones. I mean, I thought they were poor. If they're poor, why do they have cell phones? It's like, well, how else would you communicate with the world? How else would you apply for a benefit? How else would, I mean, if you didn't have a cell phone, what would, if this is not, I get to play video games on my cell phone during my lunch hour. This is a lifeline for me. And so while I think it is essential to get the impacted folks engaged and involved and to get a sense of power out of the possibility, I also think there's an opportunity to share at an emotional, at a gut level. This is what my life is like.
Yes,
This
absolutely.
This is what it's like.
Yes. And so to speak to that, I was once impacted. I mean, I didn't come up privileged by any means. My husband and I raised three kids, and we were struggling. Thank goodness I made it through nursing school because it was rough for us. Very rough. So I can relate to some of them. We were never homeless, thank goodness, because I had parents, my Raymond has parents, my husband has parents. So we had their help, but it was really tough for us. So I can feel some of the impact that they're feeling. Like I said, thank goodness we never slept in tents or cars or anything like that, but we definitely struggle with putting the next meal on the table, things like paying bills. Um, so, and to speak to about the cell phones, you're right. The sometimes the people thought process on what's going on with these homeless people, or they might even see them have on a nice pair of sneakers, but they're out there begging. So it's a lot of stereotypes going
Yeah.
out there, right?
Yeah.
But to the cell phone issue, there are organizations that make sure those homeless people, they're not paying, they're not buying those, they can't afford those cell phones, but
Right.
they're organizations that's helping them to ensure that they have a cell phone. Because like I said, that's a lifeline. They may need to figure out what set up for the next organization to help them or whatever. So it's a necessity for them to have those cell phones. But the stereotypes out there are bad. They are truly bad.
Yeah.
I think to the credit of kind of the founders of the Poor People's Campaign, they recognized what Sue was talking about in terms of many of us, maybe most of us in this group, don't really understand, don't really, we have never experienced what they've experienced. And so the structure of the coordinating committee or steering committee, whatever we call it, is our goal is to get at least 30 people. We have more than 30 people now, but to get 30 people of the right balance, to get 30 people that are willing to be on the steering committee, 10 of which are faith leaders. One of the fundamental challenges is the moral imperative of doing this. So 10 faith leaders, 10 advocates like Cecilia and myself and others. We have more advocates than well, it's not nice to say, but more advocates than we know what to do with, and 10 poverty impacted folks.
And that's where we struggle.
So that's where the rubber meets the road. We can't find 10 poverty impacted people that are willing to join the steering committee and be a representative of the poverty impacted or poor people. We have 3. And and in our recruiting regime, when we recruit a person in that general category, it's really a good day.
Yes, it is.
Because that person brings a tremendously different outlook to the aspect of poverty and to the aspects of, what good is it to do to Dover? And the first question you get when you talk to a homeless person or a poverty impacted person is, what are you going to do
What
for
is the
me?
Poor People Campaign gonna do for me? Yeah.
What's the Poor People's Campaign going to do for me next month or today?
That's
And the real answer is, well, there's nothing that we're going to do that's going to really impact your life next month, next week. So it's but the balance, the balance of the steering committee is critical, so that we all understand what the dilemma is really about. And so we'll see what we can do with March the 2nd, but I hope that we get enough people there at least to have an impact on the legislature that we're in town. And,
Yes.
and we don't have all the answers, but we're here and we're gonna stay here and we're gonna, one way or another, follow what you do and in this arena and vote accordingly.
Yes, because we're all in it together, whether we're impacted, advocate, or a clergy. It's a collective thing. And we are going to have this wonderful guest speaker down there on March 2nd who was once impacted. Actually, she was once like, all of us, house, job, health, it had everything, cars, nothing. She didn't have any impacts until one major devastation occurred. And it could be something like hospitalization and medical bills rising, right? Could wipe out all of your funds. And she's speaking on March 2nd. And that's going to be really important for the impacted people to hear her story too. So we are so happy that Lyle, I don't know if y'all know Lyle, but he found her. So we are really lucky. So I think the major goal is to when Bill said when they ask what is the Poor People Campaign gonna do for me, we take those stories and that's what the Poor People Campaign build off of. And we may not be able to do anything this day, tomorrow, but we're going to keep pushing for the issues that you present to us. So their voices are very important. And then finally, we talked about the coordinating committee, the 30 that Bill referenced, but then there's also a base. So the committee are the people that meet weekly, and we're doing it definitely weekly now because we have this March 2nd event coming up and then followed by June 15th, I think it's going to be in DC. But I think prior to that, we was meeting monthly or every other week, Bill, maybe. It was less. So we're just, pushing weekly now. But then the base is over 1,000 people. And the base is people who come out and support the Poor People Campaign when we have events such as March 2nd, the one we're going to have in June, the one we're going to have February 20th, when we go to the State House and let the legislators know that we're coming in March and in June. So it's a two-part piece to that.
It would seem to be a small enough ask to say, be present, be counted,
Yes.
make your voice heard, make your presence be known.
Yes.
It's not a giant financial contribution. It's not a sacrifice in any regard. It just says, this matters. This is important.
Yes.
I care about it. You should care about it. You who make the laws, you who
Yes.
make the decisions, you should care about this. And we're
Absolutely.
here to tell you that we're paying attention and ultimately it will matter.
That's right.
I had an opportunity, some of you know, a few months ago, to participate in a simulation of returning to the community from incarceration. And you took on the persona of someone who'd been released from jail. And you had to navigate the system with all the millions of assisting organizations who frankly could have cared less.
Yeah.
And it was a 1-hour simulation and I was deeply impacted by it. In fact, by the end of the hour, which made up 4 15-minute weeks, I had determined that I was leaving the state and I was going to get a job where I didn't have to use my social security number and I was going to disappear because I couldn't reintegrate into the community, even though my particular persona had pretty much all the benefits you could have. That experience of hitting brick wall after brick wall was stunning.
I
There
bet.
is a simulation on the wealth gap
Mm-hmm.
that helps explain why Black people's wealth is so much less than white people. And
Mm-hmm.
there's another one on poverty
Mm-hmm.
and what it is like to be poor, where you keep hitting the brick walls, where you keep experience, so that it's a significant emotional event.
Yes.
Appreciation of what this is really like. And it's
Yes.
amazing how an hour or two can alter your perspective on these circumstances in a meaningful way, not
Mm-hmm.
just intellectual. And so Westminster's Adult Ed Group is going to take a look at offering these simulations to
Mm-hmm.
various and sundry groups as part of a way to educate people, and particularly the poverty-related piece as it comes to the Poor People's Campaign, to help garner more of the base, not
Yes.
necessarily the advocates, but the people who
Mm-hmm.
will show up and say, I understand this now in a way that I didn't before. And if all I have to do is go to Dover one day, I can surely do that, given what it is that other people have to go through. So I think it offers some hope for a broadened base, greater support, and a more
Yes.
meaningful group of people having their voices heard.
Absolutely.
Who
Thanks for
ran
sharing.
that simulation, Sue?
The one that it was the Delaware Center for Justice that sponsored the event. And they hired a group from Pennsylvania to do this particular one. But Shannon Hansen of Newcastle Presbytery does the same thing in Delaware. And Westminster has partnered with Friendship House to acquire the materials to do the wealth gap simulation. And then we are also planning to do the same thing to be able to sponsor the poverty simulation. So at least initially that would be done in concert with Friendship House and Westminster Church. And we would want to make it available as broadly in the community as we possibly could. It's
That's great.
when you get
Great.
that emotion connected to the data and the facts,
Yeah.
a whole different
Yes.
circumstance.
Absolutely. Wow.
So watch for that. Tell your friends and neighbors, come participate in these simulations, because they are transformative, or can be.
Yeah, definitely. Wow.
Will
Thanks
that
for
be part of the Thursday night thing, or are you gonna do that as a separate?
They'll need to be done in person.
Oh, okay,
They need to be done in person.
okay.
So we'll probably do them at Westminster and or other places. I mean, we have a huge facility that's perfect for that kind of, but you actually, you walk from place to place and you experience the doors slammed in your face and people saying, I gave up. I had 3 bus tickets, and before I could figure out what I needed to do, I'd used all my bus tickets, and I went to buy more bus tickets because I had money. But the person at the bus ticket place told me I couldn't come to the bus ticket place because I didn't have a bus ticket. It sounds, it was stunning. It was just stunning. So yeah, it'll be done in person. And just to tell you, after that was over, we had a get together and I talked about the Wicked Witch of the West, who was my probation officer, and how obnoxious she was. I called her a 5-letter word. She was awful. Turned out the woman who played that role was sitting in front of me. And she said I had to do it.
That's
But
right.
she explained, and what the others did, is that the people who were engaged in being the quote resources, it was horrible for them
That's right.
to have to say, I can't help you.
Yeah.
I don't know. So it was emotionally educational for everybody who was involved in the situation. I can't tell you how powerful it was. So I'm hoping we can do more of these.
Yeah, it sounded like it served its purpose. I mean, wow, how amazing,
It did for the group that was there, so we just
Yeah,
need to get more
yes,
people exposed to it. It really is something.
yes,
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for your energy and your effort,
yes.
and the commitment to make a difference.
Well,
in
thank
people's
you.
lives.
And I'm just hoping, like you said, it's a good cause. I'm hoping that everyone will be down in Dover. Tell your friends about it, your neighbors. We want to come in numbers and show our strength that these issues are very important. And, we're not going to go away. And the issues aren't going to go away until our legislators do something about it. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Bill, thank you for arranging this. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Population connection.
Thank you, Population Connection. Yes, Roger, thank you. You want to say a word or two?
I'm
We
sorry, I'm
have
going
asked-
to leave.
Okay, thanks, Cecilia.
Thank you.
We've asked Hannah Evans of Population Connection or Pop Connect to speak to us, and her emphasis is probably going to be on gender inequality and particularly with respect to access to family planning and other issues and of child and of education that impact a lot of environmental issues. So it's all rolled into one. They've spoke before a few years ago at our church. It was very successful. That contact I lost, but Hannah Evans is the outreach coordinator for that group now. And I think, yeah, so look forward to her presentation.
Look forward to seeing you next week. In the meantime, be well.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Good
Thanks.
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.